And we're live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of Pro Democracy Pod. We're very excited to have Robbie Yeager, independent financial reporter. Robbie's somebody who I think I've only been following for about a year now, but he's consistently putting out more journalism than like most of the alternative media people that I follow. And just doesn't like really get into the bullshit too much. So I really appreciate that about Robbie. I don't. What's your Twitter handle? It's RobletoFire.
So it's RobletoFire. So it's kind of like a play on like the Harry Potter book. Yeah. So like, yeah, you can chalk that up to just like whenever I first started Twitter. Like I don't know, just had to find something funky to go by. But yeah, I've kept it. So whatever.
You mentioned J.K. Rowling, and I told you we're gonna keep all the alt-right stuff before the show. So I don't appreciate that.
I'm so sorry.
Our viewers must be very upset right now.
Wouldn't want that.
So, like I said, Robbie, he's just he's always putting out financial information, donor information on like NGOs and major left activist groups, and kind of exploring like the inner workings of like that kind of patronage network, right? So he's a really interesting person to follow. I would recommend everybody check out his Substack, check him out on Twitter. But it's funny, and I want to talk about this before we get into your work. But I tweeted out about our podcast today, and what I say, like what I call it, Billionaires for Democracy, how financial elites steer left activism. And this fucking troll comes into my comments, and I have no patience for these people. Like normally I'm like, I try to be gentle, nice on Twitter. If I have a political criticism, I make it political and not personal. I try to be like that. I don't always succeed, but this fucking asshole is like telling me that this title is anti-Semitic. And I have no respect for that kind of analysis, because one, it takes like identity as like the core priority of like left analysis, and two, like if we can't talk about how billionaires have co-opted left-wing movements, then the left has no hope. I mean, there's no way it can improve itself. And it leaves so much to be desired. I mean, how can you expect? I mean, I think basically, if we're going to define the left, and we've talked a lot about this on the show, but if we're going to define it, like I think anti-capitalism is like a pretty good like core tenet that like is pretty universal across the entire left. And so how can you expect to have anti-capitalist movements or success in those movements if you're not allowed to talk about the billionaires backing them?
I didn't know that billionaire denoted Jewish, so like I was wondering where your billions were, Alex. Like you never mentioned that before.
Well, I keep them in the Cayman Islands.
Okay.
Like everyone else, as you should, right?
Yeah. Fortunately, I've been smart enough to dissociate with Putin's inner circle that's gotten exposed like 4 or 5 times in these Panama Papers, Paradise Papers. What was the other one? There was another one. The most recent one, Pandora Papers.
The Pandora Papers.
Yeah.
So you really got undercover.
I saw the troll that you're referring to, and I think it's actually like I'm actually in a way glad that I mean, I hate that you had to deal with that, but in a way I'm glad that it was brought up so we could actually talk about that, because it's a great point. And it's something that I have dealt with in the past, as far as like reporting on these guys, like it's this billionaire upper crust class, specifically the billionaires that are trying to flex an unfair advantage, and that's exactly what it is, and influence our election system. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword in a way, right? So I think that a lot of this comes back to which one is the most famous, the most infamous, I guess, billionaire that always pops up every time this stuff comes up, especially when we're talking about Democrats. It's usually always Soros is going to be number one. And there's multiple reasons for that. Number one is that, I mean, he's fucking everywhere. And if his name would stop popping up in financial disclosures, then we could stop talking about him. But they don't. But the problem is that for years and years, bad faith actors, mostly on the right, have done a terrible job in factually reporting on what he's been doing politically, right? And I think that it's allowed centrist Democrats, the liberal, your run-of-the-mill liberal, to kind of hyper focus on those reports and basically. It's that word association game, right? You see somebody covering Soros, so the first thing that you do is jump on it and say, well, this is anti-Semitism, right? Because he must be only talking about Soros because he's Jewish, which simply isn't the case, because there's lots of things, and I mean lots of things, that have absolutely nothing to do, obviously, with any of that. That you could criticize Soros for, and lots of other billionaires, right? I'm just using Soros because he's the biggest example, right? And he's usually always the one that gets the anti-Semitism comments coming your way when you talk about him. And I feel like, again, a lot of that has got to do with really bad reporting in the past that has been really easy to weaponize by the left, right, or centrist Democrats in defending criticism. And and to its credit, bad reporting takes away credibility from good reporting, right? We see this all the time. We've seen it with Russiagate, Pandora Papers, whatever you want to say. I mean, the media has done it. It's a great job of shooting itself in the foot, credibility-wise, over the last few years, especially. So, any excuse we have to discredit, it's actually really easy to do so. But the fact is that Soros and, Peter Thiel, for example, I mean, the list goes on and on. Donald Sussman, list the Simons, James Simons, Eric Schmidt, they run the gamut of religious ideology, identity wise, and it really doesn't matter, because they all have one thing in mind, and that's influencing American politics on a grand scale, which they're very successful with. So when I report on billionaires, like take Soros for instance, and like you said, I've reported on Sunrise Movement in particular, right? I've done a lot of reporting on them, and he's been a major benefactor. And the problem is that people want to just, again, throw the anti-Semitism trope out, but the real problem is that Soros himself still holds major investments in natural gas companies. He still owns investments in the owners of the Dakota Access Pipeline, for Christ's sakes. It might be a small investment, but the investment exists still in his portfolio nonetheless, and that should be troublesome for people that are supporting a supposedly grassroots environmentalist group, regardless of the heaps of other billionaire cash that they've received. If I'm just using just one example, I mean, like I said, there's actual reporting to be done and legitimate criticisms to be levied. And I feel like, unfortunately, that gets drowned out a lot of times when you're talking about billionaires, because it's so easy to just, throw the ad hominem, to the wind. And most of the time it works, quite honestly, which is a sad thing.
Yeah. And it works against like what's supposed to be, it's like the thing that like people, the first thing when you mention Soros is people say, oh, Jewish. Well, how about CIA? Because he was part of the CIA's covert network that was like destabilizing the Soviet Union. And it's amazing because he's so involved in domestic politics, where he has this like boogeyman kind of character, right. But like internationally, he's like also super involved with like U.S. regime change ops. I mean, in Ukraine during the color revolution, the Orange Revolution, he was a big financial backer of that. He backs opposition media networks. Mm-hmm. And so, there's like this guy who's basically a billionaire CIA asset, and he's totally off limits because, anti-Semitism, as if like, well, that's like, I was going to open up a can of worms that I don't think I want to, but
I'll no one can criticize you either, Alex. That's it. It's done.
I know, right? Yeah.
But it makes
they're all anti-Semites. This guy is an anti-Semite,
Well, it makes me think of like kind of the Obama days as well, because I think both like like Soros has definitely experienced anti-Semitism from
Sure.
people, and Obama definitely experienced anti-Blackness. It's just that these are both tools to silence what's valid criticism of both of them, like including, you know, like they're like harming the communities that they purport to be helping. Like Obama destroy the most prosperous country in Africa, right? And it's like, but criticizing him is seen as racist. Like, it's just, you know, it's very I think, you know, similarly when we think of like instances of anti-Semitism, like the most egregious or severe forms or the people who are suffering from it the most are not the billionaire class. Like, it's just not.
Yeah, and I mean, just to put it out there, because I kind of was I tried to say it then stop myself. You know, U.S. citizens in general are not victims of anti-Semitism. There's like some, you know, instances where there's violence against Jews, but like, you know, the way that people talk about that, it's like there's fucking pogroms in Brooklyn, and it's just bullshit.
Right.
You know, there's pastrami everywhere. I don't think there's pogroms.
Comment. I don't know enough about that.
Yeah, Mila, you're not allowed to just sit this one out.
Well, I mean, my whole thing is that, you know, and to Mila's point, I mean, she hits it right on the head. Like, it's weaponized narrative, right? Again, you know, with the Obama thing, plenty of, and I mean a myriad of valid, legitimate criticisms to hurl at Obama. But again, in today's culture, there was so much bad reporting on him that it was easy to just, again, weaponize any valid criticism and lump it in with the, you know, the racist attacks that of course he had to deal with, you know, and it makes it tough to do our job, right? Because the whole point of what we're doing, or what I'm doing specifically, you know, is just, you know, billionaires, this specific sect of billionaires, right, the politically active philanthropy class, right, have just really outsized advantage over normal citizens, and it's not fair at all. And to be quite honest with you, I mean, nobody should be able to spend millions upon millions on U.S. elections and hide their names. Like, this just doesn't seem right, even though the law allows it. But I will remind everyone that, you know, back in 2010, 2012, right, when Citizens United was just put in place, and, you know, the Kochs ruled the world, right? I mean, there was no bigger dark money machine in American politics than Koch world, and then Karl Rove with American Crossroads, right? It was all just, you know, it was all GOP. Flash forward to where we are now, Democrats are absolutely destroying the GOP in terms of the amount of dark money, its super PAC support. I mean, now, granted, the number one super PAC of the previous election was a GOP outfit, but the total amount of dark money that came into the election benefited Democrats like at a 4-to-1 ratio. It was like $500 million. It was some insane amount. It's probably even more than that. A completely insane amount. And, you know, we've had recent reporting over the last few days of some of the biggest politically active billionaire funded dark money groups, such as 1630 Fund, the Silicon Valley funded Future Forward USA Action Fund, two of the biggest, I mean, tens of millions just into a super PAC, let alone all of the outside donations they made to, you know, what we call pop-up groups. That, you know, basically just open up shop for a few years during an election cycle, get heavy funding from some opaque organization out of state. They run a bunch of ads, they fund a bunch of super PACs, and then after the election cycle, most of them just go defunct and shut down, right? Unless they had like massive success, in which case they keep going. But, you know, a lot of times these organizations only last a few years and then they're gone. And I feel like the AstroTurf aspect of that, you know, if that makes any sense, you know, is such a problem, because especially in the progressive circles, you know, a lot of people tend to believe that a lot of these, you know, progressive groups, right, that are floating around out there are, you know, ground up, youth led, grassroots organizations, you know, just a bunch of concerned kids, a bunch of concerned citizens, you know. And it's a lot of times it's just not the case. Like, we can even look to recent history with the with the Kirsten Sinema situation in the bathroom, right? Everybody remembers that. Was it just a bunch of concerned students? Maybe. Or reporting has also shown that the group that claimed that bathroom confrontation nearly got almost all of their funding in 2019 from George Soros, like almost all of it, like 1.4 out of like 1.5 million, something crazy. But you won't hear that side of it. I mean, again, you'll see that in maybe some right-wing media, but progressive media. Yeah, and look, there are some publications that hit or miss for me, right? Free Beacon is where that report came from. I was able to validate it. I double check their work. I mean, I shouldn't have to, but I do it anyway just to be sure, because I don't want to, spread misinformation myself. And yeah, I mean, it's true. And again, you're not going to hear that discussed a lot. You're just going to see, look at these angry students that just want to be heard, right? And
and they're doing exactly what the Democrats want them to do. And also, I should say we are pro misinformation on this podcast.
Well, my whole thing, I just that was kind of one thing that drew me to, covering Sunrise Movement as much, because, something was just like, okay, my whole thing is that whenever you get a big presence and you're preaching or you're saying something about, we're funded by kids, we're led by the youth, we're just a bunch of concerned citizens. Well, that's great, but I want to see if that's true. And the further along we get, the less and less that looks like it is true. But yet again, we just have this huge problem, especially in progressive media, where we idolize these organizations and we prop them up and we make it so that even their endorsements seem like they're worth their weight in gold. When in reality, it's just another billionaire-fronted organization making it look like this is the direction that they want you to go. And it's a dangerous slope, considering that it's 100% legal for, say Soros, Simons, Ford Foundation, Eric Schmidt, they can all fund this group and anonymously and make you believe that it's just a bunch of concerned citizens. And now you're doing pretty much exactly what they want you to do, which is dangerous in any society, but especially where we're at now. I mean, we're kind of in a bad spot too, because I mean, unless Citizens United gets overturned by the Supreme Court, this is just going to continue to snowball year after year.
So I have a question.
Sure.
Like, what I'm wondering is what kind of sway do the donors have over these organizations? Like is the criticism of an organization like Sunrise that someone like Soros can actually dictate like what they want to do or what their goals are? Or is the criticism that if someone like Soros is funding them, they can't really be that subversive?
Well, it's a little bit of a two-handed question. So on the one hand, you have, especially in Sunrise's case, there has been reports from people, there was a very public kind of falling out amongst some of the members over the last year, where one of their, longest tenured members actually came forward and said that major donors, even though he didn't name who they were basically requesting that they stop doing antagonistic protests and stuff like that. Like, so you notice how you haven't seen a whole lot of sit-ins, right? Like you saw in the beginning where they were crashing Feinstein's office and sending all sending all the flowers to Pelosi or whatever it was that they did. Now you might have seen them begging Joe Manchin, but Joe Manchin is an easy target, right? These days, you're not taking any risks. Even the DNC mega donors, are not going to feel bad if you target Manchin. So that's like an easy win, right? So there's that. But my thing is, this is just me personally, it's about messaging, right? It's hard for me to really support a group that is not being completely honest about where they get the majority of their funding. Sunrise in particular, like this again, say how they're grassroots, how they're youth led, and and they're small dollar funded. But in actuality, they're getting like roughly, like I think, 42% of their overall haul in 2020 came from small donors. Right. And that's less than half. So I just don't, and they're not being honest about it. Right. They say that something just doesn't feel right about that, right? You're saying one thing, but really behind the scenes, the numbers just don't make it true. And then again, there's the other thing. So can you be subversive if you're being funded by Soros? If you were just getting a little bit, say if like you had a massive budget and he accounted for just a small sliver of it, I would be more inclined to, not think that's a huge problem. Only problem is that, when we're looking at the numbers, Sunrise in particular has gotten over $1.5 million from Soros since 2019. That's by far their largest donor that we can find. And we're talking about a combined budget between Sunrise's two main organizations of roughly like $10 million, right? Between the two. I think this was, 2019, right? Their latest tax returns that they came out with. So, you're looking at proportion here, and you're also getting, funding from, Liz Simons, who's the daughter of James Simons, who you might know as Renaissance Technologies, the huge super mega hedge fund. They got $250,000 from the Ford Foundation, 100,000 from Eric Schmidt, from Alphabet Google. And when if it's just one name, you might be able to look past that. But whenever you start cranking out a list, right, of names like that, especially now with the reporting from Politico yesterday on the 1630 fund, the major dark money unit in the Democratic circle, Sunrise got another $950,000 from them last year. That's more than the 500,000 that we already knew about. So it's like $1.4 million in dark money just in 1 year. And this money is all coming. It's not coming from small donors. Like, this money is coming from the big guys, the big boys, the people that want to make a lot of they want to make a lot of change. It's just the change that they want. It's not necessarily the change that's going to help us, right? They're really the ones. It's not really the organizations that are subversive. It's, in a way, it's the billionaires that are subverting the way that we look at our politics, right? Because again, as long as they can back secretly an organization that seems like it's led by small dollar, average Joes like you and I, they can pull the strings from the background, and nobody's the wiser, because again, this type of reporting isn't really all that flashy, so it might be easy to overlook it, So there's a bunch of numbers.
I actually disagree. I think this is like the most important thing. But the thing is that so much of the left media and the left NGOs are like constrained because they have the same funders. Every time I look into it, a lot of my career, what I've done is focused on like humanitarian NGOs, and it's always the same list, and Soros is up there. I'm glad you mentioned the Ford Foundation and the funding that they're doing towards these left groups in the U.S., because the Ford Foundation was another partner of the CIA during the Cold War. And you mentioned Koch too, the Koch brothers, and you look at what the Koch brothers and George Soros are doing now. Well, they're actually funding what's considered the most progressive foreign policy think tank, the Quincy Institute.
The Quincy,
so
right.
They're setting the parameters of what's acceptable in the discourse, and they're going to attack countries like Nicaragua, which we talked about last week. I've seen Quincy Institute do that. They're going to attack Syria. They're going to attack. They're going to, it's like the Ro Khanna style. Like, you say, oh, I'm a progressive because I criticize Saudi Arabia every 3 months.
Oh boy. Ro Khanna, that's something else. That's something else entirely. That guy.
Like, what a low bar that, oh, you're progressive because you criticize like this, like
a feudal monarchy.
Yeah, like, great.
But I'm gonna end the Twitter live stream for now. I hope that you guys all join us on Rockfin. It's rokfin.com/prodempod. We're gonna have more from Robbie to come. So thank you for tuning in so far. Yeah, and the thing is that everyone, like, when the Lincoln Project did that like op in Virginia where they went undercover and pretended to be Nazis in support of what's his name, Glenn Youngkin, everyone got mad, right? But I don't see that as like fundamentally different from what these billionaires are doing with these groups. whether it's like those people funding Black Lives Matter, because they're faking it. It's an information operation, right? They're saying this is a grassroots thing. People are mad. This is like this action, this protest is a result of a critical mass of angry citizens, and it's not. It's a result of your billions. So, I think that it's really not fundamentally different, and it is an issue that we have to talk about. And it's a fucking shame that these people that cry anti-Semitism every time you mention billionaires. I mean, there was somebody who did that during they were trying to do that with Bernie, right? They were trying to say he was a self-hating Jew during the primaries because he was talking about billionaires. Who was that? You remember?
I don't want to. I don't want to put a name on the person. I mean, it sounds like something like Bill Kristol would say, but I don't know if that's
of course
true.
He would, yeah.
I don't know if that's true. I do remember the quote though. I just can't remember who it was that said it. I'm probably totally wrong.
Well,
and then you have
guys for that.
Yeah,
no, go ahead.
Same thing. Yeah, exactly. But one of the groups that you talk about a lot has a guy that's a part of it who like pretty much bought his way into the presidential election, and it's not Michael Bloomberg, it's Tom Steyer. He's part of the Democracy Alliance. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, Democracy Alliance.
Tell us about that organization.
All right, so Democracy Alliance, right, is the epitome of like organized dark money, right? It's this kind of anonymous, secretive billionaire group, right? Just roughly that we know. We don't really know all the members, right? We know Soros, Steyer is a member. We know that the Bekensteins from Bain Capital are members. Carla Gervetson, I believe, the big Elizabeth Warren super PAC funder from last cycle, I believe, is also a member. But there really is no official member list because it's all so tight-lipped, right? It's almost impossible to know. But here's the thing, though, is that they gather in secret, usually twice a year. Very hush, hush, hush. I mean, NDA is everywhere. You're not allowed to talk about it, whatever. And they basically get together and have this weekend conference in the spring and in the fall. And the basic gist of it is to get around. I mean, they have a whole bunch of guest speakers, by the way. And surprise, surprise, Cori Bush, Justice Democrat Cori Bush, was one of them at their very most recent one, just the last
people like DeRay McKesson and Greta Thunberg.
Right. Like again, Sunrise Movement, their Virginia Prakash has made several appearances there. But again, I'm getting off track. So basically what they do is they just sit around and basically discuss where the money's going to go in the next cycle. What, quote, investments are they going to be making? And by that, what they mean is, all right, we're a bunch of billionaires sitting in a room, basically saying, okay, we're going to narrow out these dozen or so organizations, and we're going to focus all of our funding efforts on these organizations. Now, most of the time, these organizations are 501c4s, right? Which means they don't have to disclose their donors to the IRS or to the public. And, they can basically just, again, donate tens of millions of dollars, an unlimited amount of money, technically, to these groups. And they can coordinate it with each other, which is the big deal with Democracy Alliance. It's like, it's one thing to have, say, Soros over here, Donald Sussman over here, and Eric Schmidt over here, right? Like, and they're all donating to different organizations. Or you can get them all into the same room and say, all right, let's just all pool our resources and just dump money on organizations A, B, C, and then X, Y, and Z, right? And that's essentially what they do every year, up until recently when they just switched presidents. So they actually had a list of organizations on their website that they sponsored, which has since been removed. And again, there's your usual suspects, right? That you would think: Center American Progress, the Brennan Center, Brookings Institute, right? Stuff like that. The big boys, Aspen Institute. But then you've got Center for Popular Democracy. You've got Working Families Party. You've got Indivisible, right? These so-called progressive organizations, right? That, again, when you see them, on Twitter, you would get a complete, there's no way that these guys are completely funded by billionaires or sponsored by a group of secret billionaires. Like, it sounds like something out of a Bond movie.
Yeah, I'm actually getting a phone call from the Anti-Defamation League.
That's happening right now. I knew it. Oh, we're gonna get shut down. Man, even on Rockfin, this is too much. But no, you know, and that's the biggest problem with the DA, is that honestly, it's some of the, and this is not even a joke, some of the most wealthy and most powerful individuals in one room for an entire weekend discussing strategy, financial strategy, basically plotting the course for hundreds of millions of dollars to flow through the next election. And quite honestly, the right just does not have anything like that at all. They just, not only do they not have the, I mean, they have some billionaires, but they just don't have the coordination that Democrats do. And a lot of that is due to Democracy Alliance. And quite honestly, here's a little fact, and it's something that I'm working on now. I'm actually just waiting for the info to drop, if, you know, when the filing comes through. But the chairman of Democracy Alliance is a man named John Stocks. And that's notable because John Stocks is also the chairman of the country's largest workers union, the NEA, the National Education Association, who, and he has not been afraid to dump, like, he dumped like $17 million into a giant Democracy Alliance sponsored dark money vehicle last year. That was in an off year, right? Or not that, in 2019, excuse me. The way I have stuff in my head, I'm starting to think of time as the way that filings think of time, which is not accurate. But 2019, in an off year, he donated $17 million, or his union did, right? The NEA did, to a massive Democracy Alliance sponsored dark money vehicle, which again would disperse into smaller organizations and, you know, go from there. It's like a trickle down effect in a way. And I'm waiting. I'm expecting a huge number from the NEA come the end of the month when they're filing their financial filing for the previous year is due. Because if that's what they're giving in an off year, there's no telling what they're going to give in an election year. I mean, for 1630 fund, and I keep bringing that up because they're the biggest dark money vehicle the Democrats have. In 2019, they raised $137 million. 2020, 410. An astronomical amount of money. And that's just one group. The Future Forward, the Silicon Valley based one, that was primarily funded by Facebook co-founder Dustin Moskovitz and Pierre Omidyar from First Look Media, Intercept fame, right? He gave $45 million to the group. $150 million in 2020 after raising only $5 in 2019. So that just shows you how explosive these billionaires, whenever and a lot of this is due to Democracy Alliance coordinating, getting everybody in the same room, planning out a strategy, and this is what we're going to flood these certain organizations, who are in turn going to turn around and either disperse funds to other organizations or just flood the airwaves with ads. And I think that boils down to one of the biggest things when I talk about an advantage that the billionaire class has over individual voters. Is that, again, even at maximum, you can only donate $2,900 to a campaign. But of course, that thing called SuperPACs allow people to spend unlimited amount of money. I mean, Peter Thiel has made two $10 million donations to 2 SuperPACs already this year. And that's just ridiculous, right? But, you know, the fact is that gives Peter Thiel a massive influence over the messaging going forward through the election. I mean, our voices will never be as loud as Peter Thiel's. Our voices will never be as loud as George Soros's or Tom Steyer's, because Tom Steyer has got millions upon millions upon millions to constantly flood the airwaves and your streaming services and, you know, basically any type of media you consume. I know it was so annoying. It wasn't just for me. It's not just for you. It's for everyone. When you're watching Hulu during an election year, it's, you know, every 3 seconds, right? Anytime you go anywhere, to look at any type of media, it's just you're bombarded with ad after ad after ad after ad. And quite honestly, most of those ads are coming from super PACs, not campaigns, because these super PACs basically just act as marketing firms for candidates with unlimited budgets. And the fact is that you and I would have to gather what hundreds of people, right, to put out one ad buy the size of something that Tom Steyer could do in a second. And so it's not that there's a bunch of people that are just banding together and pushing for this single candidate. A lot of times it's just one or two people making it seem that way. And that is something that is a huge disadvantage for normal voters, because we can't do that. We have no control over the narrative, over the messaging. The billionaire class do. And they flex it every chance they get. And I'm sorry, even the For the People Act that was, killed earlier this year, and all of the quote financial campaign finance reforms that they contained within, it wasn't even going to come anywhere close to being enough to stop any of this. It was just something to talk about at best, right? We need complete, and this is what I always say, ground up campaign finance reform, because if we don't get the money out of politics, then how are we ever going to change anything else when the special interests have all the power, right? I mean, how are we supposed to convince a Congress full of people funded by pharma billionaires and, insurance companies to do a Medicare for all system? I just don't understand. How are you supposed to convince them of that when the checks they're getting is just far outweigh anything we're ever going to be able to provide? So it's a serious problem. No lasting reform can happen until we fix our broken campaign finance system. I mean, that's just the way I feel about it.
Yeah, I actually recall. So when I did my master's in political theory, and I remember taking a seminar in democratic theory, and there was this reading we had by Ronald Dworkin, who's a legal scholar in the U.S., and he began it with saying our politics are a disgrace and money is the root of the problem. Mm-hmm. But I think you just can't really have a democracy at all if you allow for this kind of unfettered spending. If you don't have an equal opportunity to influence outcomes, then what is the point of even calling it a democracy? And so in the US, Canada, maybe to a lesser extent, I think our campaign finance laws are a bit stricter. But it's still, they're not real democracies in that sense, because the opportunities to influence our outcomes are so unbalanced.
Yeah. I mean, that's 100% correct. I mean, how are you even supposed to trust? And that's another huge thing, is that, I mean, how are you even supposed to trust what's going on with the election system when that you're just being completely drowned out by a handful of people? It's kind of a defeating thing. It's a defeating notion for the average person to think about once they start. I mean, hell, once I started doing this reporting and I really started seeing the numbers and seeing the sheer amount of money going into our elections, it was some of the most depressing shit I've ever seen in my life, because it really hit home. We are totally outmatched, in this game, and it's kind of a tough pill to swallow for someone. You just have these ideals, the world could be so much better, we could fix this, we could do this, the solutions seem to be right in front of us, until you realize that the roadblocks are what they are, and it's almost seems insurmountable at times. It's kind of a tough pill to swallow.
Well, it's not just elections either. It's the media, right? Mm-hmm. And that's another trope, of course, right? And I'm not saying Jewish people own the media, but for instance, Saudi Arabia has a huge role in American media. There was a really great piece I read recently about Vice, which is seen as this progressive outlet, but it is funded by Saudi Arabia. And as a result, they publish these pieces that totally obscure what's happening in Yemen and what Saudi Arabia is doing in Yemen. And like that feeds misinformation to people who read Vice thinking it's like some progressive outlet and are going to take their word for it on those matters.
And then they send these young 20-somethings from Brooklyn over to Syria to interview Al-Qaeda about Game of Thrones. You know, they did that. That's not a joke. You know, and I mean, that's the thing. The left, the left-wing movements, the activist groups, and the media are supposed to be like the defense against this kind of things. And that's exactly why they've been co-opted by the billionaires. And, you know, I'm glad you mentioned Piero Midyar, somebody who I've talked a lot about. We have Piero Midyar, George Soros, the Koch brothers. We have the Ford Foundation. Like, every time you see a humanitarian NGO that's like up to some shit in another country, and they pretty much always are, you go to the list and of donors, and you see the same names, you see the same foundations, and it's oftentimes the same ones that are trying to influence domestic policy in the U.S., that are trying to like overthrow governments alongside the United States and other countries. So it's almost like we have a ruling class. You know, I mean, but we can't talk about it because some sensitive people on the left might think that we're suggesting there's like a secret cabal of Jews that run everything.
No, but there is a secret cabal of billionaires that run a lot of things. I mean, that's true. Democracy Alliance exists.
Mohammed bin Salman, I don't think he's converted yet, but we'll see.
I missed that. I'm sorry.
I said, I'm sure Mohammed bin Salman hasn't converted to Judaism yet, but we'll see.
It could happen. I wouldn't be that surprised.
I mean, look, I mean, that's always going to be the thing, man. We just got to push past that ad hominem bullshit that, you know, and I know it's tougher for some other people than others. And, you know, like for me personally, like after a while, I realized that there was always going to be a group of people, especially typically on Twitter, that are going to have this dog shit opinion over, you know, anti-Semitism and what it means to report on the billionaire class. And, you know, to me, to be quite honest with you, the biggest failures of this whole discussion, as much as they like to think that they're the only ones that talk about it, is progressive media, 100%. And I used the word progressive with implied air quotes in case anybody was wondering, because that term means nothing really anymore. But when I use that, I really mean, like, you know, the Sanders wing, squad wing, indie media, leftist media, so-called. So because again, you'll hear them talk about, oh, well, cinema's being backed by this pharma front group, or, you know, this Republican over here has got dark money backing them, and, you know, they want to do all these exposés on January 6 groups, but where are they? They're not policing their own side, right? And that's the biggest problem for me, because how is anybody ever going to take your arguments? It's like saying I'm sitting here smoking cigarettes, and then you spark a cigarette and me tell you, oh, fucking this guy, you're going to kill yourself. This shit is terrible for you. How are you supposed to take my advice seriously if I'm trying to tell you to stop smoking, but I can't, right? And that's the exact type of thing that you hear from progressive movements. You know, it's all bad, dark money's bad, billionaires are bad, until they're supporting your cause, in which case it's, oh, well, and tell me if you've heard this phrase before. Well, Alex, we can't unilaterally disarm. You know, we can't just, I mean, the other guys are doing it. So, you know,
it's called the Warren excuse, right?
Yeah. As long as it's, yeah. Oh, that she's the one that coined it. And God damn it, because since she did, everybody's used it, right? As every time you hear, well, we can't just unilaterally disarm, as if super PACs are the only way to get a message out. I mean, just think about the fact that these campaigns could be running these massive ad blankets just as easily as super PACs can, but the only problem is that you don't get to you don't get to donate $10 million to a campaign. You can only donate $2,900. But I mean, you don't need super PACs to do this. Again, you're just trying to get an advantage. You're trying to play within the system that, you know, you allegedly want to reform. And, you know, as much as I have a massive disagreements, especially now with Bernie Sanders, the one thing that he always says is that you can't change a corrupt system by taking its money. And while his campaign finance stuff has been pretty clean, his advisors, on the other hand, like Jeff Weaver, Chuck Rocha, not so much. But that saying is true. No matter how you feel about Sanders, really is irrelevant. The fact that that saying is true is that it's really hard to change a corrupt system, right, by playing the same corrupt game that everybody else plays, and then saying, well, you know, when the rules change, we'll change too. But where's the incentive to change the rules if you're winning? And I think that's the biggest problem I have, is that I don't believe you, right? When you say that you want campaign finance reform, like 1630 fund, again, $410 million last year in anonymous funds. Oh, well, we fully champion, you know, changing the rules. But okay, well, if that's the case, then why don't you just make the first step of good faith, right, and willingly disclose your donors, even though you don't have to? But you notice that they won't do that because they don't want to, and it's for the same reasons that the Kochs didn't want to, right? It's all the same game. It just really feeds into this theater production that we call politics nowadays. But again, I think that if there's anything to be gleaned from any of this, it's that simply, you know, the money that's coming in to our elections is A, obscene, B, it is coming primarily from one percenters, right? The typical, you know, the typical ones that you think of when you think of mega donors to politics. That's where it's coming from, and it makes our voices all but insignificant in a lot of different ways. So again, that needs to be the focus on where we move forward politically, is that, you know, if you're not talking about campaign finance reform as a candidate in 2021, I don't really have any time to listen to you, you know, and because, I mean, quite honestly, what are you're just going to be, you know, yelling at the moon. Quite honestly, you're barking at the moon, you know what I mean? Like, nothing's going to happen. You're just going to be wasting your breath. Yeah, I mean, I don't it's like I said, like I keep saying, it's kind of a disheartening situation to be in if you're in American politics and you really want change, because it's not anywhere close.
Thoughts, Mila?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I was thinking a lot about this because, like, in one sense, like, I don't want to be utopian about things and just be like, yeah, we can only associate with like the purest of the pure or whatever.
Right.
But I do think that, like, I found Warren's entire campaign to be very cynical. And I think she really wanted, like, I think it can be characterized by her really wanting to have it both ways. She wanted to be admired and adored by people who were progressives. But she also wanted to have a sort of like financial advantage over someone like Bernie Sanders. And so, I mean, I feel like that's very characteristic of today's left in general, where you kind of, you want to have it like both ways. I would almost prefer it if like I respect it more when people are just like, yeah, I'm taking this money and like I don't care. Rather than people who like try and like make it seem subversive. And I think like that's why people are so repulsed by the left today, especially by like the Squad or by Warren, is because they are not content enough to just be like, yes, I'm playing in the system. Sorry, that's how it works. Instead, they have to like also try and make that seem like that is an act of radicalism as well, when they're really just doing liberalism. So,
And
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But I would just like to add to that I mean, not only are you 100% right, but you bring up the Squad, right? And that's a huge, like, Justice Democrats. And, you know, I've mentioned that kind of wing of indie media before. And my biggest issue is that when's the last time that you've seen, say, a like a daily poster really like come at the squad or something, or TYT or any of those so-called progressive, and look, I know I'm going to get myself into hot water when I say these things, but the fact is that it's a branding thing.
Of course it is.
You're not, you can't criticize the squad. You can't criticize Sunrise Movement. These ties that all this billionaire money going into that particular group, I've been reporting on that for like 18 months now. And quite honestly, it's gotten almost zero traction in what you would consider major progressive circles. It's actually been all but ignored. And I understand why, right? I understand why, because if you're a journalist, an indie journalist at that built your brand and built your reputation off of essentially shilling for progressive politicians, right? That's your fan base. That's your donor base. That's your subscriber base. It's kind of tough to turn around. It takes a lot of, I guess, intestinal fortitude, I guess, as you might say, to turn around and then actually say, I know I've spent a lot of time praising this person, and I know that my viewers really love this person or this group, but what this person or what this group is doing is bad, and it's not right. And it's just as bad as what they're doing on the right. In principle, it's the exact same thing. That could possibly destroy your brand. And a lot of these journos out here are just, quite frankly, too afraid to do that, take that leap. But I feel like it's important, because if you can kind of turn the spotlight on ourselves, right, and be like, okay, we can only fix right now what we can control. We can control what, this little section of our party does, or this little section of politicians. Like, if you really think the squad or the Justice Democrat or Progressive Congressional Caucus really cares about, what you think, if you really think you have that kind of sway over them, then put them to the test, right? And, make them be honest with you. And I think that would get you a lot more success as a journalist, because people come to you for objectivity. People come to you for truth. And when it seems like in the end you're just playing sides, I mean, yeah, it might be the side that we're all on, but it looks partisan, and you have that veneer of coming in good faith. But honestly, nothing sinks your good faith argument like the appearance of a partisanship. It makes it look completely one-sided and hypocritical. So you've got to be willing to police your own side of the street before you start shining the spotlight on the other side of the road. And I think that's one of the biggest failures that indie media is coming across right now. And I hope it changes for the sake of everyone, that maybe eventually people will just get so fed up with everything and just stop believing everything and everyone. And I know that that's like a cynical view to take, but I feel like we're getting shitted on, and like, by everyone. So I mean, honestly, nobody really deserves your trust at the moment. We should be digging into everyone as journalists. I feel like
the thing is that whether it's The Intercept or the Young Turks or The Nation or the Real News, or like all of these left-wing publications are funded by these people. I mean, that's just, so they're not going to touch it. I mean, trying to get an Intercept reporter to even use the name Piero Midyar is like pulling teeth. It's impossible. And then you said, oh, well, we're not policing our own side. But when if you do decide that you're going to police your own side on the left, they tell you, oh, you're like a right-wing agent or a crypto fascist. And so they might say something like, Robbie, you're helping the Republicans by attacking the squad. Well, listen, nothing could be worse for the Republicans than the squad not winning their elections. Like, if you're attacking the squad, that's like attacking the Republicans, because it's like a mutually beneficial relationship. They can point to AOC or Ilhan Omar and say, or any of those guys, and say, this is why we have to vote Republican, because look at these people, and that wins them a lot of votes. It's very helpful for them. So I mean, but again, if you do police your own side, then you're just disowned. So
Right.
I mean, there's really. Go ahead.
I don't.
Oh no, I didn't want to interrupt. I just want to quickly just add that like to that, to that end, it's not like it, I always rebut by saying, am I helping the Republicans by reporting on what they're doing, or are they the ones helping the Republicans by actually doing what I'm reporting on? And like that's the huge distinction that people don't want to have that conversation.
Am I advancing anti-Semitism by talking about what George Soros is doing, or is George Soros advancing anti-Semitism by doing what he's doing? It's the same thing.
It's chicken and egg type level theory here, but I mean it's also but it makes sense. Like if Soros, like again, like I always say, if Soros's name wasn't fucking everywhere, I wouldn't have talked about him so much. If the squad or whoever this politician is does these things, if they didn't do these things, I'd have nothing to report. So, I mean, it's a shoot the messenger situation, and I think as journalists, like we've all kind of accepted that role, right? I mean, we know that we're going to report things, and people are going to be mad, and they're not going to want to believe it, go into some kind of denial phase, and like idolatry type like level shit that they have for certain politicians and groups, and they're just going to blame you. They're going to call you a liar. I can't tell you how many times I've posted screenshots of public documents and like, oh, this is fake. This has got to be fake. Like, I wouldn't even know how to fake it, but I'm like flattered that you think that I could pull something like that off. But why would I sit? It just, the levels of delusion that a lot of people have when you just don't want to accept that the politician hero that you have is just another politician, doing politician things. So yeah, you get disowned. But the good thing about, I think, where I've kind of been I'm not going to say unique, but where I've been fortunate is that I try not to get into the squabbles, right? Like I pop into Twitter. I'm not to say that I never have an opinion on anything, right? But most of the time I just try to stay out of the arguing and the stuff. I just try to post the factual information that I know, and leave it at that. I mean, the discussion, hopefully it provokes discussion. That's what I want. I want to post things that people don't know, report things that people didn't know, and I want them to take that information, know that it's coming from a factual place, because I always try to link the document, because I feel like showing your work is a huge part of what we do, and then it kind of takes the whole, oh, is this real information, is this fake news, out of the whole window. You put the document there, it's there for everyone to see, and you can take in the information, and then hopefully at the very least provoke a discussion, hopefully across the aisle, with someone with a different outlook on politics or life as you do, and hopefully come to some realization that, hey, both one thing, Democrats and Republicans both overwhelmingly, I'm gonna say Democratic and Republican voters overwhelmingly support is campaign finance reform, and that we can come together on that, and then once we get that taken care of, we can work out the rest of it. That's the goal for me, is just bring awareness to the problem, do what I can. I'm not trying to make $1 million off of journalism. I'm just trying to do something. I feel like I can do something to not just like I do my part, I guess. I'm not sure if that's the best way to say it, but I feel like I know enough to do stuff to maybe enlighten a few people that don't know as much and wouldn't be able to know as much, and hopefully I can make somebody make that much more of an informed decision going forward, at least politically speaking. So I mean, I feel like that's the best thing we can do, is just stop shooting for the moon with everything, right? Like talk to the people that talk to the people that are closest to you, and try to not necessarily convert them, but just try to inform them, and then hopefully that information will spread to the people that they know, and then in the end, maybe you've done a little bit of good in the world. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I going back to like what you said earlier about policing our side, I think maybe like this could also be, I don't really, because like I don't really use the leftist label, but like I don't look at people like the squad and think like these guys are my side. Like,
Yeah.
if anything, like as an anti-imperialist, they seem quite opposed to my side. And so like I kind of question the utility of even like trying to like latch on to any of these politicians to begin with. I think in the US it's like you really don't have, I mean, I'm not American, but like you really don't have like much to work with. And it's the same here in Canada. And so like I don't know. I mean, on one hand, it's like, oh, maybe you want to have allies in Parliament or like in Congress, but on the other hand, it's like a lot of these people seem very antagonistic to like my values. I got into politics to oppose war. Like, there's no one there for that right now, right? And so it's like it almost seems more useful for me instead of like focusing on like what sides to take in these like political battles to like try and pressure the people who like are profiting from these wars, for instance, which are not necessarily political actors. They could also be like weapons manufacturers or stuff like that. But I never like look at these kinds of people and think like, yeah, I don't know. Like I just don't. I kind of question the feasibility of even conceiving them as people on our side.
Oh, I understand that completely. I mean, especially in America for sure, and especially, I mean, you see it on the right too. I mean, Trump was a huge one. Sanders on the other end of this like cult of personalities that we just get sucked into in America, and it's really toxic because then it's like, you really think that this politician is really there looking out for you. When in reality, it's just some kind of mystique that is being built around them, just to honestly sell another politician, because that's what America's good at.
Well, I think that in the U.S., because it's so in your face and prevalent in the lives of many people you probably know, the lines are drawn around healthcare, right? So if you're like, and this is the case for a long time, if you were, pro universal healthcare, pro Medicare for all, you were considered left. And then if you were against it, you were considered right wing. I think that's kind of where the consensus was drawn. But that's starting to become a lot more muddled, I think, because on one hand you have leftists, so to speak, like the, I don't know, the people that were like against force the vote, right? Who are detrimental to the cause of Medicare for all. And then you have an emerging group on the right that is, comes at this question from like a pro-family conservative perspective, who actually do favor Medicare for all and do think that, big pharma needs to be reined in. This is just another example of how these distinctions are kind of withering away, which is kind of a frequent topic on the show. But I think it's that, and it's also some of the culture issues, trans issues, and that sort of thing. But they will disown you if you go against the grain on any number of topics. So, I mean, that's why I left the left. No, I'm kidding.
Well, it's just like, yeah, it's not really like, and we've talked about it before, but it's like these are just like now like these partisan indicators. It's like I don't really know what it's supposed to mean anymore, and like.
Well, right now do you think Rittenhouse is innocent or guilty? That's the thing right now.
That's how you can know if you're on the right or the left, right?
Yeah.
My girl Olivia is Antifa.
Oh, okay.
She's an Antifa. She told me.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, is that why she has pink hair? But I realized that's not her hair.
No, could you imagine? Oh my god!
Yeah. You like make your Antifa dog have pink hair. Animal abuse. But yeah, no, it's I think it's like a really good thing to talk about. And I mean, I've worked in the nonprofit like sphere before, and like it is very complicated because like you do end up working with some really well-intentioned people, And a lot of the times it's just like you really like have to just take from donors that you might not like. And I really grapple with that, like ethically. But I would say, like, it seems to me that there are differences in how much influence donors that like have. And so
Sure.
I would say that
Well,
it would be like when responding or like when anticipating objections, that would be one that like I'm always curious about.
Right.
Well, that's the thing. I think real quick. I think the question is do you think that the billionaires as a class are going to invest in their own destruction as a class?
No.
And I don't know how anybody can answer yes with a straight face.
Right. I mean, absolutely not. I don't believe so at all. I mean, look, even though the billionaires that invest in these major climate activist groups, such as not just Sunrise, League of Conservation Voters, Sierra Club, Greenpeace, right? The Wallace Global Fund, which is like some big environmental like investment fund that funds other environmental charities and stuff. There's a financial incentive for what they want, right? I mean, a lot of these people have major investments in green energy and up and coming companies,
Congolese
right?
cobalt mines.
And look, and they're banking on the fact that, hey, if some kind of Green New Deal framework or something along those lines, right? Because you hear that a lot, right? Even though that's not really like a talking point anymore. But that was, yeah, right. But
sorry to interrupt you, but what the fuck happened to that?
I don't know. I think that, like, again, there was lots of very wealthy people that stand to make a lot of money off of that specific type of economy. So yeah, they're not just supporting it to save the planet. I mean, there is always a financial incentive. You're not going to find the billionaire class funding their own destruction, as you said. It just makes zero sense. And I'm 100% with you. I don't see how. I mean, look, you're going to have philanthropists, billionaire, very wealthy people, like Mila said, that are going to have good intentions in some cases, right? And unfortunately, they're going to get overshadowed by the ones that, not only do they like, yeah, you gave a lot of money to Greenpeace, great, but you also gave like $60 million to some random super PAC that's supporting a dude that has done nothing but continue fracking like nobody's business. So at what point does one thing outweigh the other? Or do they cancel each other out? I mean, am I supposed to praise you for all of the great things you've supported and just forget about all of the rotten things that you've done? I don't really I can't really reconcile that, right? So that's why whether fair or unfair, billionaires like Soros and Steyer, and the like, whatever they donate to, you're only going to hear about a lot of the negative stuff, right? Because again, and this is just like, even for like, I guess normal people, like average people like you and I, we could do everything that we want to do or anything great we want, but if I drive drunk and kill somebody in my car, that's all I'm going to be remembered for, right or wrong, and eventually, like, it's going to be one of the things that people talk about when they talk about me. And it's not going to, oh, hey, remember that time he saved that cat out of that tree? Or, oh, hey, remember that time he helped you carry your groceries to your car after they fell out your bag? It's like, oh no, I do remember that time that he hit that guy while he was drinking, though. And that's what it's like, and I know it's kind of, that's not the greatest analogy, I understand that, but again, whenever you funded so many organizations overseas, like you said, that have had so much to do with these CIA operations in foreign companies, in foreign countries, you've funded so much money going to basically guerrilla information campaigns trying to influence domestic elections. How much praise am I supposed to heap on you for donating a few million to UNICEF? It's just one of those things.
Yeah.
You want to,
well, it's a whitewashing exercise, right?
Well, you want to give people credit for doing good, and I understand that. But I just feel like the good are they doing the good stuff just to take away from the bad, or is it the other way? It
it's a
becomes
whitewashing
complicated.
exercise. I think I brought this up on another show, how Piero Midyar got implicated in the largest human trafficking scandal in the United States history. And so what did he do afterwards? He started a anti-human trafficking human rights organization, and not for nothing. I mean, I get that, these groups are like doing good things a lot of times, but like you gave the example of UNICEF. Where the fuck was UNICEF when Palmyra was taken over by ISIS? So, and people will say, oh, well, George Soros and the Kochs are, funding the Quincy Institute. Well, where's the Quincy Institute when Nicaragua is under attack, when Venezuela is under attack? They're not there. They're talking about how Saudi Arabia chopped up a Qatari asset,
Right.
who is a Washington Post journalist. So, I don't buy this whole, there's good and bad. I just don't. I mean, no offense. And I do think it's a whitewashing exercise. You take these pet causes, climate change, racial justice, criminal justice reform, and you throw money at them and you say, hey, we're good. We're good people. We're liberals,
Right. I totally get that.
Yeah. Sorry to rant. I don't know if you guys have anything to add. We're over an hour now, so we might be. Are you guys ready?
That's fine
to get going. Okay. Well, again, Robbie, thanks so much. I really love your work, man. You cut through so much of the bullshit. Like you said, you don't get involved in these squabbles. I like that you just you find shit, you put it out there, and you're really fucking good at finding shit. So I hope that everyone follows you. Keep an eye on Robbie. He's been doing this for like a year and a half. You were saying before the show,
Yep.
and he's the best there is at it. So we're super grateful to you because you just help us get through so much of this nonsense. So love to have you on again, man.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Look, yeah, appreciate you guys having me on. Amelia, it was nice to meet you. Alex, it was finally nice to actually talk to you in person, kind of. Again, I'm really grateful you guys had me on. I really appreciate it. Anytime you want to have me back or just talk or whatever, feel free to hit me up. And you do great work as well, by the way. I really appreciate your journalism. It's really fantastic.
Thanks, man. Mila's not too shabby either.
I'm not
I need to get more.
I
want to get more acquainted. I actually just started following Mila today, so I'll hope to get more acquainted with her work shortly. So
I'm not a journalist.
Mila's too busy saying
but
I really do. I was just supposed to say I really do appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk about
yeah,
this
man,
stuff.
and I hope people check you out. All right, guys, thanks so much for joining us next week. We hope to see you again. I'm sorry, thanks so much for joining us this week. We hope to see you again next week. Mila, was that a white supremacist symbol I just saw? Did you do this?
No, I just
I thought you did that. I was like, what are you doing?
This?
Canceled.
Oh, that's the okay thing?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
I thought you did that. All right, everybody, thanks for joining us.
Bye.